Hey everyone, welcome back to Undefined Engineering, the podcast helping you make your transition from classroom to career. I'm your host, Christian. I'm here with my special guest, Scott Sinclair. He is an experienced manufacturing engineering manager and highly accomplished as well. So I'm really happy to get him here on the podcast. Thanks for coming out, Scott.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to give a background on myself.
Yeah, education background. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so background. I grew up in Oklahoma, not really small town, city, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a pilot and an engineer as well, and a small business owner. So I was into engineering and especially aerospace from a young age. So my dad, being an engineer and a pilot, he actually built 2 aircraft in our garage.
What?
Yeah. So when I was in junior high and again when I was in high school, he built an ultralight aircraft in our garage.
Wow.
So I was the kid that couldn't hold a flashlight still enough for him to do the job. But we had a great time. I really loved building those aircraft with him. And then he had other aircraft. He had a Cessna 172 and a Blanca Super Viking that I grew up flying with him. And so I just grew up around airplanes. Absolutely loved it, going to air shows and seeing the Blue Angels. And so, needless to say, once I got to college the first time at the University of Oklahoma, I was a little wild going from a small high school to a big college. And so I did a lot more enjoying myself with the libations than I did going to class. So I ultimately joined the Navy to get a little act right in me. And the funny story there, when I went into the recruiter's office, I knew I wanted to do something in aviation in the Navy. And I chose the Navy because if I chose any other branch, I was either going to be in the sand with a gun, which I didn't want to do. And if I chose the Air Force, I may have gotten stationed at Tinker Air Force Base where my mom worked, right? So I definitely didn't want that. So I went into the Navy. I chose to be an aviation bosun's mate, working on catapults and arresting gear. And so when I went to the recruiter's office, I brought my DVD of Top Gun. And so I put that in the DVD player. And then the opening 5 minutes, there's a scene where an F-14 touches down and it cuts to a guy that's like on the back of the ship and he gives like a kick and a fist pump, And I paused it and was like, that guy. I want to be that guy. And so sure enough, 6 months later, after boot camp and A school and training and stuff, I got to the carrier. We went out to sea, saw my first F-18 land. The F-14s were retired off the West Coast at that time. So we had F-18s on board. It landed. I gave the kick and the fist pump.
Oh,
and I was
that's
like,
awesome.
Wait, 3.5 more years of this shit. And so it was fun. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed working with the engineers that would come on board and do depot level maintenance. And so I asked a lot of questions while I was in the Navy, learned about the systems, how they worked, did a lot of maintenance on them. So really got like the mechanical aerospace bug in me.
Nice.
Realized after that enlistment, I was in for 4 years from 2004 to 2008. I got out of the Navy, went back to school, went to a junior college for a couple years, transferred to UCLA, got my degree in aerospace engineering. And then how did I get into manufacturing engineering? Well, the summer, when I graduated, my last semester was a summer quarter. I had to take like one last class in summer. So during that quarter, it was like August, August 2013. A friend's dad was a manufacturing engineer. I didn't know what a manufacturing engineer was. Mm-hmm. UCLA doesn't have a manufacturing engineering program.
Yeah. So a lot of schools don't. Yeah, it's kind of surprising.
Yeah, and so I was in aerospace because obviously I'm a Top Gun nerd, and I like to build stuff. So he asked me. I sent him my resume, and he gave me a call. And the first question he asked was, "What do you want to do as an engineer?" And at the time, I was getting my lunch eaten by my classmates, right? I mean, those are the guys that are going to go on and design Starlink, right?
Yeah.
Design a new beamforming technology or create the internet, which was built at UCLA, right? I was not going to do those things. But I could look at something that was built or a process that was happening and say, this can be improved. There's ways that we can trim fat out of this. There's ways that we can make it better and more efficient, or make it easier for somebody to put together. So I had that eye. I wasn't going to create it, but I guess you could say I was good at judging.
Yeah.
Right? And so I explained that to him, that's kind of my skill set. And so I wanted to make improvements to things. And he said, "What you just described to manufacturing engineering." And I was like, "All right, well, let's go with that." So the company he worked for actually had an open position. I went and interviewed, got a job. That was Parker Aerospace. Started as a manufacturing engineer. Spent 3 or 4 years working as a manufacturing engineer. Did a lot of tool and equipment design. So I spent a lot of time in CAD.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot about GD&T. I worked very closely under an experienced tool designer, former machinist. He was a mentor of mine. Just outstanding learning opportunity there. Eventually started working on transitioning products, not only from new development to production, but from production to an offshore facility. So I spent a year transitioning newly designed product from our Irvine, California facility down to a manufacturing facility in Mexico. So that really gave me a setting up a new manufacturing area experience, as well as transitioning a product from kind of one manufacturing environment to something new and training a new organization on how to do it. So that was really valuable. I went from there to being a production manager at Parker Hannifin. So I managed all of our fuel system production. At the time, I had 40 direct reports, give or take. That's way too many direct reports. I spent a lot of time writing reviews and dealing with HR issues, but it really expanded my education in people management and the understanding of all of the production processes that are a result of what a manufacturing engineer does. So that was a great experience. And then from there, I was kind of looking for the next role of, I'd like to manage a group of manufacturing engineers. I have a lot of experience and success in transitioning product from new development to production. So let me go see if I can do that in a company that isn't already structured to do that, like Parker. So every role I had at Parker, I moved into the next position because somebody had it before and they left or moved up, right? So I was always in a role that existed before I was there. And I wanted to see if I could build an organization to do that new product introduction without it having been done at that org before. I wanted to bring my skill set in and build it from the ground up. And so I found Shield AI, and they were looking for an MPI manager. And so I came in and started managing that group, and that's kind of where it led to.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So one conversation led to a leap of faith that kind of steered you down your entire career path. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you for that background, Scott. Before we get more into this, I want to give our viewers a little breakdown of how we're going to split up this interview. So we have 3 blocks in mind. First block, we want to get more into the deep dive of the individual contributor role around a manufacturing engineer. Block 2, move more into the management and how your role and responsibility changed moving into a management role. And then block 3, I kind of wanted to come at it from a student's perspective and pick your brain a little bit and get that insight for what they should really be focusing on going for a role as a manufacturing engineer. So, all right, I guess we can go ahead and get started with that. I feel like you've done a pretty good job of this already, but could you give us just a broad overview of a manufacturing engineering role if you were describing it to a student?
Yeah. So manufacturing engineering is focused on process engineering versus product engineering. That's probably the broadest way that I could describe it. So when you most people think of engineers, they think you're designing a new product. You're building a new satellite, you're doing the stress analysis on a wing for an aircraft, something like that. You're looking at things in a wind tunnel and yada, yada. You're spending a lot of time in CAD. A manufacturing engineer is spending a lot of time understanding what the needs of that product are. how that product should go together efficiently, and how the technician or the robot is going to assemble that product and do it efficiently. Beyond the product aspect of process engineering is material flow. So how is material coming to the workstation in the first place? How is it going to flow from one workstation to the next? When do you cut off the work at one workstation and start it at the next one? And then how is the information that's needed to put that together, how is it communicated to the person, the robot? How are those work instructions developed, or those process instructions? So that's what I would say. That's probably the quick answer there is manufacturing engineering is really process engineering versus product.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a really good insight. When you first started as a manufacturing engineer, like what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced coming into that role?
Probably learning the things that didn't have to do with putting parts together. I would say almost everybody that goes into manufacturing engineering did so because they're tinkerers. They like to build stuff. They're good with tools. They understand what's ergonomic and what's not, what's more efficient and what's not. The things that I didn't know going into it were the complexities behind, I'll say, material flow through a facility. So how are products inventoried? When a product changes, how do you denote that change? Where do you cut it in? How do you ensure that your process controls those changes effectively? So if an engineer changes a product and says, yeah, we can't use any more of this from now on, so everything has to be reworked. How do we ensure that the processes that we've set up and the systems in place that we use allow us to stop that material in place and control it and then move it on? So that side of it, the material flow side, was something that I had zero experience in, and I think most people do when they start their engineering career. And so it's a challenge to learn. I'll say more so if you're product engineering, because it's not really a focus. If you're process engineering, it would benefit you to realize it's a deficiency and try to learn it quickly. Yeah. And to that, I would say, get real buddy with your planner.
Yeah. I was just about to ask you, what helped you cover that gap in that knowledge when you initially were facing that challenge?
Man, get with the guy that's done it before. When you find an engineer, so early in my career, I worked with a manufacturing engineer who had been at Parker for 22 years. That guy knew everything about everything. And so I could not sit next to that guy and ask enough questions. He had an answer for everything. And so I would say look for those people when you start your career. Find somebody that's got all the answers. And if you're not sure if they have all the answers, find somebody that's highly respected. This guy was both. And ask those questions. As a senior engineer, one of the joys that you get is when people ask you questions and you have the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like the old guy sitting in the bar. He just wants to give you his advice so bad. He's just hoping he overhears you say something that he knows a lot about so he can talk to you. So take advantage of those things, but don't take them all just at face value, right? Challenge those assumptions. And I think a lot of new engineers are really good at that, right? Kind of trying to poke holes in it and find their own way.
I agree. And I do believe a lot of new engineers are good at that, but I also feel like that's a roadblock that a lot of new engineers face. Specifically when I started my career, my coworkers around me, I know a lot of people were scared to ask those types of questions because they didn't want to look like they didn't know what they were talking about. Yeah. So what sort of advice would you give to someone who's dealing with that internal struggle of
if you're in the first 3 years of your career, I would say ask away. Oh, yeah. Nobody's going to look at you like, oh, you should know that already, right? If you're in the 3 to 10 year period, why didn't you ask those questions in the first 3 years, right? No, I mean, it's still good to be curious. You may want to change the phrasing of those questions to instead of just kind of asking the direct why, maybe offering a solution and then asking for feedback on that solution.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get around that fear of, man, I'm not sure how to do this. And instead of asking and trying to dial in the exact right way to do it, try and stretch a little bit and say, how about if we do it this way? What are the ways that it could go wrong and how could it be better? That's a great way to phrase a question that really means, I don't really know what we should do, but we should do something rather than nothing. And it allows experienced people to come in and say, they feel like, I've got the answer, right? So they feel good about it. And then you feel good about it because you're getting an education from them, right? They're poking holes in it and saying why it couldn't be. And it gives you the opportunity to maybe see that they're wrong about something and see an area that you can improve on.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. In terms of like a successful engineer as a manufacturing engineer, what sort of tools and systems did you learn as an individual contributor that you think kind of sets you apart from like your peers? Because as you start your career and you slowly progress, you can see who will take those next steps and progress up those levels and who's kind of not going to get there. So what were kind of some of the things you noticed back then?
Yeah. So so when I started my career, I would have said one thing. And nowadays, it's probably a combination of that and another thing. So when I first started my career, it feels like forever ago, but it was 2013. Maybe that is forever ago in engineering years. But when I started my career, what I noticed right away was there weren't a lot of manufacturing engineers that had a solid background in CAD and understanding blueprints like to the detail level. Where you could analyze a blueprint, you could do your own tolerance analysis, you understood geometric dimensioning and tolerancing, right, GD&T, and not only understand it, but provide recommendations for how it could be done better, right? And so the mentor I spoke about earlier that helped me a lot with tool design was really key in helping me develop that skill. That set me apart from other manufacturing engineers. He was a former machinist, and so when I went to dimension a part that I had designed in CAD, I would just kind of throw dimensions on until it was fully dimensioned, right? Till the sketch turned green and in SolidWorks. But what he really taught me was, look, there's an art to this. The machinist here is going to touch off of a surface, zero his machine, if he's doing it manually, and then he's going to move that machine across a certain distance. Give that dimension directly. Understand how the part is going to be made, dimension it in that format, and you'll get your parts quicker. Yeah. Your part will be cheaper. You'll get better bids and cheaper bids for designs that you want to get made from suppliers. And so understanding that was extremely valuable. Learning how to get in CAD and design tools was extremely valuable. The other thing I'll say about that is when I first started, little interesting story. When I first started designing tools, the first tool I designed was a holding fixture for a fuel valve. The fuel valve had a square flange on it, and so with sharp corners. So I drew a holding fixture that was a plate with a square pocket. And I went to this mentor. This was like the first time I was talking to him. I heard he was the expert tool designer. So I was like, let me get feedback from this guy. So I took him the drawing for this part, and I was like, hey, what do you think of this? I felt kind of good about it. I drew it in CAD. I made my own drawing. I toleranced it. And he just asked, how are you going to cut that bottom corner of that square pocket? I was like, I don't know. That's up to the machinist to find out. So after about like a 10-minute ass chewing, because this guy was Argentinian, he was pretty fiery. After about 10-minute ass chewing for not knowing, my ass from my elbow, I took that information and said, you know what? In order for me to be a better manufacturing engineer, I'm going to be working closely throughout this career with people making the parts. I got to learn how this stuff is made. So I went to the community college down the street, found an intro to lathe class that was twice a week. It was 4 hours. It allowed me to get into the machine shop with a machine shop instructor and have access to the machines. So I tried to audit the class, but they wouldn't let me audit it, right? Because otherwise every machinist would just audit it and pay the lower amount. So I had to pay for it. I think in California it was $80. And I went to that class, and the first day I told the instructor, look, I'm not going to do all the homework. I've got an engineering degree. I'm a manufacturing engineer. I want to learn, but I don't need to learn how to make parts. I need to learn how parts are made. So I'm going to come to this class. I'm going to make a couple things. I made a hammer handle, which is like what everybody makes first, right? Kind of cool. Still have it. But I told them, look, help all the other students all you want, but I'm going to sit here in this lab. And when you're done helping other students, I want to walk around with you and just pick your brain. I want to talk about how parts are made. I want to bring in tool drawings to you and get your feedback on whether you would curse me out as a machinist or say like, hey, yeah, this kid knows what he's doing. And so that was 2 nights a week for like 4 hours a night for 10 weeks or 12 weeks or something. And that was like the best education I could ever get into like manufacturing and machining design.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, overall, it sounds like the tools and skill sets you'd focus on are things that like really improve manufacturing efficiency, stemming all the way through to product design, which is insane. But I think a more like overarching thing that you may not have like directly covered is that's like an extremely determined and relentless approach to like learning. It seems like you have like that continuous improvement, I guess, mindset just ingrained in you from what I could see.
Yeah, I have a deep interest in the field, right? I mean, I have yet to meet a great engineer that's like, about engineering, right? I mean, my brother's an engineer. He was about engineering. He spent a very short time as an engineer and moved right into business.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, and that's what I see from like really smart people that get into engineering and aren't really that into it, right? But when I was talking earlier, I said there were 2 ways to approach like what you should focus on early in your career. And one of them was, be a manufacturing engineer that knows CAD and can design in CAD, because that will span to other facets. Nowadays, be a manufacturing engineer with some programming experience. Understand software, how it's being used in the manufacturing space, and how to program even some simple scripts, right? Use some PLC logic to make a test fixture for something. If you come into manufacturing engineering today and can write some sort of programming code for anything, to pull up a report on efficiency or time study of a project, that will set you apart.
Yeah. Manufacturing
engineers don't learn software. We don't like software, right?
Yeah.
At least the ones that are my age. I love it now, but that's probably my biggest weakness and what I've had to really focus on in the last 2-3 years.
No, I think that's really good advice. And that software side of things, I think that can stem to pretty much any field in manufacturing. Like myself as a quality engineer, I think that's a very good skill to have.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, transitioning from individual contributor to manager, that's a pretty big transition. I kind of want to get an idea of like how your role and responsibility and scope of work changed going from an individual manufacturing engineering contributor to a manager.
Yeah. So in engineering, when you first make that transition, it's typically not direct from I'm doing individual contributor work to I'm only doing managerial work, right? Especially at startup companies, right? There's an expectation typically that you may do, 50% IC work and 50% managerial work, right? So you're still going to know how to do the work. With mine, it was a little less because I kind of transitioned from manufacturing engineering initially to a production manager where I was leading technicians and like a production environment. So that was a real quick switch where I went to very much like leadership, people management, but I wasn't out in the shop building parts, right?
Yeah.
Like my direct reports were. But what I'll say is, if you're an engineer, I think it was harder back in the day, but nowadays it's pretty easy to continue as a technical engineer, not move into leadership just to move to the next level. When I was kind of making that change, that was back in 2018, I think it was. And I mean, that's not that long ago, 6 years ago. But at that time, there was kind of a question of like, we have really good engineers, but they would make terrible managers, right? So what I would say to engineers that are coming up now is, if you're a great engineer and you're really loving being an individual contributor, or like being an engineer, and you are not just absolutely passionate about leadership, do not move into a leadership role. It is extremely difficult to be a leader, especially of a group of extremely smart engineers, if you don't love that role and you don't love that challenge. I would say even more than the technical challenge of being an engineer.
Really? What are some of those challenges? Could you outline like what you're talking about in particular?
Yeah. So engineers by default, like by their education, right? Engineering school teaches you how to be a problem solver, right? I mean, you boil it down, all of the engineering skill sets say, here's a limited set of tools and an infinite set of problems. Go out in the world and be effective.
Yeah.
Right. That's what an engineering education is. So when you try and lead a group of people like that, it becomes a team of people that have the answers or believe that they do, right? Which is excellent. You want a highly motivated, highly confident engineering group, but you have to really focus on separating, telling somebody what to do and guiding them in the direction that you want to go. So the best engineering leaders that I've worked for, even at what I would call the manager level as opposed to the leadership level, the managers don't really task manage. They don't assign tasks. They don't tell you what needs to be completed. But instead they say, like, this is the capability that needs to be developed by this time, or this is the goal that we need to meet. For a manufacturing engineer, it may be, we need line stoppages below a certain amount by this time, or we need a throughput or an efficiency, right? To a certain level. And when you can act as a leader in the role and identify those types of goals where you're not telling somebody what to do, you're still letting them solve the problem, but you're giving them the finish line for the solution. That's when you can really motivate a team.
Yeah.
And
trust your engineers, right?
Yeah, and guide them along the way, right?
Yeah.
So engineers really like shiny things. We're easy to be, easily distracted. So another part of engineering leadership is focusing on what's important at the time, right? Solving the problem that needs to be solved right now, because we want to solve all the problems, right? We're engineers. There's not a problem out there that we can't solve.
Yep.
So if it gets in front of us, we're like, oh yeah, it's the shiny object. We want to solve it. So that was the thing, was trying to back out of I want to solve every problem, and instead say, I want to transition into being able to develop the vision for what a group of solved problems looks like.
Yeah.
And then try and empower a team to go do that.
Wow. So when you're leading your team, what are some like key things that you look for your team members to I guess be successful?
Yeah. I want them to be hungry.
Yeah.
And so I've interviewed a lot of engineers. One of the things that drives me nuts in an interview, right? Here's what I don't want people to do. When I ask you a question about how you've done something before, don't talk about how the team or the company has done it. Like, oh yeah, my last team, we did this, we did that, or the company accomplished this and that, right? Because I have no idea what you contributed to it. right? I've worked on teams with people that are horrendous at their job, and we have accomplished outstanding results.
Yeah.
Right. So that person can go on to their next interview and say, "Hey, I worked on a team that, released new configurations of aircraft to production in 18 months. The original goal was 2 years." And okay, that sounds great, but that guy didn't do anything. He may have held the team back. So when I'm interviewing an engineer, I want them to be able to speak directly about how they contributed. What are the things that move the needle? How did you provide value? And providing value isn't necessarily like a project that you completed. You could provide value in your ability to learn quickly, right? So one of the things I used early in my career was, hey, I didn't know anything about CAD, machining, how to make parts, right? Back to that example. So here's what I did. I went and took a night class, and asked questions. I kind of thought outside of the box. I didn't do all the homework. Instead, I went and found an area where I could learn what I needed to learn, and I kind of made up my own solution to how I was going to solve that problem, right?
Yep.
That didn't drive any real value for the company other than I learned a new skill, but it's not a specific project that I could put my finger on. But yet, when you deliver that in an interview or when you talk to somebody, mind when you're interviewing for an engineering position, you're interviewing with engineers. They're bright people.
Yeah.
They put two and two together, right? And so anything that you can point to where you encountered a problem or a deficiency and you solved it, focus on that.
Yeah. And for like new students, that doesn't necessarily have to be in like a business sense. They could use project experience.
Right.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that. I ran into a couple situations like that actually in a few interviews where you start off the interview, someone talks about how their team was successful, and then you move deeper into the rounds and you find out nothing really, they didn't really contribute anything. So
yeah, one of the best things that I heard from a leader about interviewing was, in an interview, the best thing that you can do to really find out a candidate's depth is to continue to ask questions deeper and deeper about what they're talking about until the candidate gets stumped. And then if you know about it, offer a solution and kind of see how they respond to it. That's very difficult for both sides, right? Yeah. It becomes extremely uncomfortable as a manager because you may be interviewing somebody really bright that you like, and you got to keep pushing to get them in an uncomfortable position, right? Ask them further and further details. And why did you do this? And were there other things that you thought about, other pathways? Is there a better way that you could have done it? Why didn't you do it that way? And so it's a very difficult thing for both sides to do. But as an engineer, especially as a younger engineer, if you're looking to take that next step and you're interviewing for new roles, challenge yourself with those questions, right? Rehearse your standard interview questions and then try and poke holes in it. You'll come up with your own way of getting out of those. And then when you encounter it in the interview, you'll be a lot more confident.
Yeah. And that's just a really great skill to have, because especially for your team, being a manufacturing engineer at a startup company, like, you're definitely going to deal with situations you've never seen before. And how you handle yourself in those situations is monumental to your development and growth.
Yeah.
Wow. Speaking of managing a team of manufacturing engineers, what would you say is like the toughest project or goal you've had to tackle as a team?
Man, as a manager of engineering, probably growing an MPI organization at a startup company, right? So coming into this last role of mine, I was hired to set up a new product introduction organization that was going to assist in the transition of new aircraft configurations from engineering development to production. When I started in this role, I had 3 engineering technicians that reported to me, and I had to build this org. And so one of the probably the biggest difficulty there was I didn't know anything about the aircraft. I wasn't a design engineer. Where I came from, working on aircraft fuel systems at Parker Aerospace, I didn't have software or like final assembly integration experience where I'm integrating systems at that level. I'm configuring systems at an aircraft level. We were more of a component supplier and a fuel system supplier, but it was hardware based. And so I was coming into a team that needed to be able to, or coming into an organization that wanted me to develop a team that was able to do all of these things that I wasn't an expert in. And an example of that is we needed to set up our supply chain and inventory for the development side. I've never worked in supply chain. I did ask a lot of questions though, and I stuck real close to my planner, so I learned as much as I could early on. So when I thought about it and how to solve this problem, how to grow this team from scratch, I looked back on my experience and I realized that asking all of those questions didn't give me the answers, but it did tell me that I knew what I didn't know, right? The difficult situation to be in is I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? That's when it's difficult to not fail or requires somebody to learn from. And in this new org, I didn't have anybody to learn from. I was here to do it myself. But I knew what I didn't know. And so I think one of the things that led to my success in that role was having that understanding and being able to go out in the market and talk to candidates and say, hey, I'm looking for somebody that can set up, they can set up a stock room, they can manage supply chain, they can manage planning for a development project. But I can't tell you how to do that. Again, going back to here's the outcome that I need, right? Being very outcome focused. This is what I need our team to be able to do. I need us to be able to handle change management of product and inventory. I need us to be able to quickly procure parts with minimal design maturity, right? And I need parts to quickly be able to be kitted and moved to the shop so that we can continue development activities. And those are kind of the outcome-driven focus that I would have when I would interview these candidates. And so that was something that led to the hire of an outstanding. I hired him as a supply chain planner. That was the title, but he did so much more than that. He was a materials manager. He was a buyer. He was a stockroom manager. He did everything. So he really delivered. But when it comes to manufacturing engineering, the hire for that is really, it's looking for people that are hungry for a challenge, right? And that really like to learn, especially when you come to a company like Shield AI or Anduril, or the number of small space startups that are happening right now, right? There's a lot of defense tech startups in aerospace. And what all of those companies are going to value is that you can go out and educate yourself, right? You can learn a skill, because what none of these companies have is the guy that's been there for 22 years that I learned from, right? That can kind of coach me and give me the answers. You're going to come into these roles and you got to figure it out yourself. So anything that you can do, look back on your experience and say, here's something where I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have somebody that knew the answers. And here's how I went out and found it myself. That's extremely valuable.
Wow. That's really insightful. And I actually have a follow-up question, but I feel like that's such a good one to end on.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you.
Yeah.
When it comes to your next role, so you're a quality engineer. You're great at what you do, right? I've found that you to deliver immense value to the organization when I've worked with you. But I also see you as having the knack for leadership, and you have the inquisitive curiosity, obviously in engineering, beyond what your current role is. I mean, you have this podcast, right? You're constantly researching other organizations and seeing what's happening in the market. When it comes to your next role, do you want to be a technical engineer throughout the rest of your career? Or do you see yourself as a leader of an organization or a leader of leaders?
It's a good question. As for me, kind of where I've always envisioned my career going or ending up, like yourself and like a lot of engineers, we're very results and objective oriented. My goal when coming to Shield AI, where we're currently at, is I wanted to enter an organization that maybe had not made that transition to market domination and find a way to get us there. And I know I came in as a quality engineer and my background is in quality engineering, but I kind of view myself as, I guess the best way to put it is an operations engineer or a task force engineer. Like you were saying, I just want to get things done and I want whatever team I'm a part of to be successful.
Yeah.
And where I envision myself going is going into a role where I can be like a strategic decision maker and really lead a team and a group of engineers, towards like an ambitious goal.
Yeah.
And ensure we're relentlessly aligned and like meeting that goal. And while doing that, I want to like empower engineers. That's kind of the reason why I started this podcast, is like I really want everybody out there to feel like they have a shot and they have the knowledge and they have the opportunity to like get to where they want to be.
Yeah.
I could definitely see myself moving into like an engineering leadership type of role. When that happens, I'm not sure, but I'm constantly going to work to try to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you, sorry, I'm like shifting into interview mode here.
Yeah.
But what do you feel what strengths would you bring to a leadership role in engineering?
In engineering specifically.
And maybe not just engineering. It could be, so I see you as a great manufacturing manager. You have an understanding of the supply chain side of it, the quality side of it, the manufacturing engineering, the planning side of it. You understand it all, right? And you've got a pretty in-depth understanding of the systems that are used throughout manufacturing, an MES, a PLM system, right, an ERP system. And so you've got a knowledge of those systems enough to do damage, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And I think you have the personality and the drive to be a great leader. So yeah, I guess is that something that you would be interested in? And I guess that's what I see as your strength. What do you see as your strength and what you could really bring to an organization?
I would say I've thought about this a lot, because when I view myself, I don't see myself as having an extremely defined individual strength. Like I have an ability to learn quickly. I've registered that. I understand that. I don't think it takes long to really unbox a problem and view things as a black box and then get my inputs, outputs, interactions, and then understand what really needs to be done. But like when I think individually, it's hard for me to pinpoint it. It's more like, I feel like it's more mindset oriented for me.
Yeah.
Whenever I see a problem and I understand what needs to be done to solve that problem, I feel like there's nothing that could get in my way to stop that. And more importantly, I know where my weaknesses and I know where I guess some of my strengths are. And I can see in the people around me what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I feel like I can pull together a small group that can accomplish a large goal.
Yeah.
And I would say that's kind of where.
So here's how I would
provide
phrase that.
Value. Yeah.
Right? You've got an engineering or a manufacturing puzzle in front of you.
Yeah.
You know all of the pieces to that puzzle, what each piece does, how it inputs and outputs into the piece next to it, right? So you have an understanding of the framework of what's necessary to make an operation successful, how the information needs to flow, the skill sets of the different areas. You have that understanding, right? So in that sense, I would say that your strength is probably in identifying how to build a team to accomplish the goals of an organization. Where I would say that you would want to develop is and your understanding of that you have that knowledge and your ability to communicate and motivate that team to accomplish its goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
well, I really
develop the vision for it, right? You understand the whole puzzle. What's the picture on it? What does it make?
Yeah.
It can't just be a white puzzle. Those things are just brutal.
I agree.
Those are the most miserable puzzles. Those are just for people that hate themselves.
Yeah, I agree. No, that's tough. White
Right.
puzzles are not fun.
Well, but Christian, thanks a lot for having me on. I
really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate that feedback. I actually wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
to
I'm
be
sorry
interviewed.
to just turn it on you.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm always in interview mode. I've been hiring so much in the last 2 years that I feel like I've never really gotten out of interview mode.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great skill to have. So
yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Christian.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Stay tuned next week on Undefined Engineering. We're happy to have y'all here, and we'll see y'all next week.